Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Powerhouse Perspective, empowering leaders for business breakthrough. I'm Scott Medeiros. I'm president of HelmWise. And if you're watching from YouTube or seeing this online from a video perspective, this is not Chandler Rose, the CEO of the Rosewood family of companies. And you're not seeing double. This is Brian Chunglo. He is the Chief Operating Officer of the Rosewood family of companies, and also he is the Interim President of ProVantage Corporate Solutions. Brian has been with us for about, 10 months now, Brian?
10 months.
10 months, and I thought it would be a great perspective to have Brian come in and have a discussion with us today about his experiences with Rosewood, his experiences overall, and the things that he's found over the years that has helped him, perhaps can help young aspiring leaders, or perhaps those businesses that are struggling to get through some difficult times. So we'll talk a little bit about people, we'll talk a little bit about process, maybe we'll have a couple of questions about the HelmWise cohort. We know that you've been to the HelmWise cohort, so you're a graduate of that. And just your unique perspectives, being new, relatively new to the Rosewood family of companies, and also an operationally minded person like myself. So Chandler's away, so the ops gentlemen are going to dominate the table today. And so this is going to be our Powerhouse Perspective for this particular episode. So Brian, let's start out with, you've done a lot of different things. Like myself, you've been in business for many, many decades. You've worked for big businesses, small businesses, you've done your own consulting. When you look across that broad breadth of things, what are the things that really you have enjoyed, that you gravitated to? Because I'm sure you've done a lot of different things, but how did you figure out that operations perhaps, or even leadership and strategy were more to your liking?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is problem solving.
Okay.
And being kind of that sounding board for solutions to come your way and weighing out the options. Being a advisor, being a kind of a counselor on understanding the issue and hearing out all of the possible solutions and weighing them all out and throwing out potential solutions that'll still get you to the same end result that you're looking for, but different ways.
And it sounds like because you're the problem solver, you like getting your hands dirty a bit, right?
Absolutely.
Because we could identify the problem strategically, but in reality, we've got to be able to translate that down, decompose it down into actionable items. And it seems like you like to be part of the execution piece of it. Is that true?
Yeah, and understanding everything that goes into it. One of my longstanding rules that I use is you can't legislate common sense.
I like that one.
You can't read it out of a book. You can't learn it in a classroom. You have to have that common sense and a little bit of that ability to think on your feet.
Okay. And what drew you to the Rosewood family of companies?
They were one of my suppliers when I was in the retail business. I was opening new stores and setting fixtures and space planning, and ProVantage was one of my fixture installation teams, and you rely on trust and confidence and reliability, and I had that with Chandler and that relationship, and we just developed the relationship over time, and we finally talked about getting our heads together and put it together last summer.
And here you are.
Here I am.
Which gives you a unique perspective, because we talk a lot here on the Powerhouse Perspective. Chandler and I talk a lot about our values, our culture, and it's easy when it's him and I, because we're talking about it internally. But you've actually seen the product of our culture, the product of our values, because you were one of our customers before. And so was that noticeable when you compared ProVantage Corporate Solutions perhaps to other vendors? Did the values and the things that we talk about predominantly here on the podcast, did they resonate with you?
I don't think they jumped out at me.
Okay.
You could see the end result of what it provided, but it wasn't, obviously not being aware of it being printed on the wall in the break room and things.
Correct.
But understanding that when they made a commitment to something, they were going to follow through. And if I picked up that phone, Chandler was going to answer the phone. So I didn't have to worry about being passed around, and they were going to, quote, do the right thing. And innovate to elevate. I mean, they'd come up with solutions to problems out in the field, and not come to me with the problem, but come to me with the solution.
Ah, so it wasn't as if we're out there espousing that, hey, this is our we before me value, or this is our do the right thing value. It was the actual byproduct of all the things. The
Correct.
fact that you could trust that ProVantage was going to deliver the appropriate service to the best of their abilities. That if there were a problem or was a problem, then you could call Chandler or you could get feedback. So it seems like it was more the resultant of all the values that we talk about.
Yeah, and it was, looking back on it now, and going back through those years of experience with ProVantage, the instances that now the core values kind of jump out more to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, there's a lot of individuals like yourself who leave organizations, join new organizations. Perhaps someone starts something new. They are maybe part of a large business and they go out and become an entrepreneur. What is sort of the approach that you take when you join a new company? How do you kind of get the lay of the land and figure out what was truly good, let's say, marketing on the front end, and you try to get under the covers and figure out what it is in reality? What's just the general process you go through?
I think you've got to learn, you've got to observe, you've got to ask the question why a lot. Why do you do this? Why do you do it that way? Why do you do it this way? Understanding the why behind everything, and the minute you understand why you're doing something, you're going to do it better. The guy that's pushing the broom on a job site, if he understands why he's pushing that broom on the job site, he's going to do it better. It's safer, it's cleaner, it makes a better working environment, things like that. So understanding that part of it, and then understanding the people. Obviously, the people come with the culture, and understanding the focus on what motivates people, what drives them, what inspires them. And the minute you understand your people more, understanding what they do when they're not working, understanding what makes them tick. Once you get that part of it down, you can build a team from a group of average people that are going to be top. Then you know how to motivate them, what inspires them to be top performers.
Yeah, and so it sounds as if your experience and the way that you approach things is very much aligned with what we taught at the cohort, right? We take that decomposition of the why and try to understand how we can communicate it to the various levels of the organization. And I've seen you in action. You are a hands-on individual. When you've been out in the field with our employees, how do you translate that? How do you kind of get them excited about living the values and delivering success?
I think they've got to understand that you're a real person, and you kind of earned your way through the process as well. That you may have been in their shoes 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and grew and learned and created that legacy. And one of the things that I took away from the cohort was, what is your core, your own mission statement? And for me, it's kind of the legacy worth leaving.
Okay.
Just 3 words: legacy worth leaving. What are you leaving behind? What impression do you leave on people? What inspiration do you leave with people? And how do you make them better?
Yes, it's one of our core 4. We talk about in State of the Captain, right? We've got the fact that we've got to be humble, we've got to have sacrifice, stewardship, and of course that legacy piece. And something you just said also is an item that Chandler and I have talked about a few times here in the podcast was that connection. You talked about actually having that conversation with that employee and connect with them. Like you said, hey, look, I've been where you are right now. It may have been many, many years ago, but I kind of understand you. I know what you're going through, or I can relate to what you're going through. And I think that connection piece is going to be so important and continues to be so important when you're trying to motivate, right? Because if they think it's just the executive or the C-suite coming in and trying to dictate versus saying, no, we are interested in seeing things from your perspective, and we want to know how we can help you be successful. So have you found that the case, that connection being very important?
Yeah, I think making that connection and giving them the understanding that you've walked in their shoes before. You've been there. I've not opposed to taking off the jacket and rolling up my sleeves and jumping on a forklift or helping them build a rack, because I have the knowledge and the experience and the kind of life in the field. It gives you a little bit of credibility. Once you earn that credibility with them, then you can work with them to tackle a lot of obstacles that they initially wouldn't think they'd have the confidence in doing, but you got to show the confidence in them.
Well, and it sounds like that credibility is also that first element of trust, right? Mm-hmm. You establishing that trust, and then once that occurs, then even though they may not understand, they trust you well enough because of your interactions with them that they believe you're taking them in the right direction. Brian, I've also heard you talk about in some of our Rosewood executive team meetings and some of our what we call the RICs, the Revenue, Integration, and Execution meetings, about the 3 Ps. What are your 3 Ps? Can you explain those?
Yeah, of course. Wrote it on my whiteboard in my office the first week I was here, and it's still there. It's the pipeline, the people, and the process. First, you got to build the pipeline in order to grow your business and to maintain your business, and that's what we do. We execute our pipeline. Then the next tier down from that is the people. The people support the pipeline. They're in the field executing the projects, and you need to develop the people in order to grow the pipeline. The third tier of that is the process. So as you grow the people, then you have more time to develop processes and be more efficient and more effective. And then it kind of starts top down, pipeline, people, then process, then it all works backwards.
All right, so a decomposition and a reinforcement back up.
Then once your processes improve, it makes the life of the people and their jobs and their process execution easier and more effective and more efficient, which gives the better end result on the pipeline that you're delivering.
Excellent.
And the people is really the biggest thing, because that's sandwiched in between both of them.
I was just going to ask you, with that, and I'm sure over the years you've seen these 3 interact with one another, and they're all present their own challenges. I was going to ask, is there one that's more difficult than the others, or a greater challenge than the others?
Dealing with human nature and people.
Yeah, people.
And again, they're sandwiched in between the pipeline and the process. So you've got to be able to understand human nature, understand the team building and the skill set of the field teams that are out there day in and day out executing, and see what you can do to support them. And the consistency of the pipeline helps develop the people, and then analyzing the processes from kind of that higher level to make it more efficient for them, because they work hard, they do a great job out there, but it's not easy work. So whatever we can do to make it more efficient and more effective and streamlined, that it helps the kind of the middle tier people.
Let's double click on the people piece. There was a session we had this morning here locally at Rosewood with our Tuesday morning blend. It was a session on accountability. So when you're out there interacting both with your leadership here at ProVantage or through Rosewood or in the field, how do you establish that accountability? What's your technique? Because it's not an easy thing. It's an easy word, but not an easy thing. What are some of the techniques and tactics you've used out there in the field to hold people accountable?
Well, I think
or at least make them aware of accountability.
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of the cliches of show me, don't tell me, trust but verify, those type of things that, there's checklists. Everybody has checklists for everything. And to me, a checklist is, a validation point. And the minute you start, and it's a level of measurement, and the minute you start measuring something, you're going to do it better as well. So understanding that I'm not looking over their shoulder and micromanaging, but I want to detail manage. I want to understand that, I don't care if they put their left shoe on before the right shoe, just wear shoes. Okay.
So it seems more that you're more descriptive than prescriptive. Would that be a good definition?
I think so, because I want to give them the kind of the autonomy to work on their own, and understand their role, their responsibilities, but still to be accountable for them, to know that we've got the responsibility to deliver, whether it's on time, on budget. We have standards that we have to uphold, and we want to maintain those.
And when you're out there perhaps recruiting for new members of your team, or maybe even more importantly, a member of your leadership team, what are some of the traits and characteristics that you're looking for? What works well with Brian?
Work ethic.
Work ethic.
Leadership. And that part of it, I think, is probably the biggest thing, is being that leader that builds a team of people that'll walk through fire with you, not for you, and understand that you're a support role. I'm a support role for my team. I'm there to lift them up when they're having a bad day. I'm there to support them when things don't go right, and to cheer them on when things go well.
And you've worked in big companies, small companies. As we tend to get into larger and larger companies, it becomes very political, very bureaucratic. So for you, going through your third P of process, what's, in your opinion, that right level of process, right? We've got to document things. We've got to make sure that people understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. But if we get a little bit too deep into the details, it can be very restricting. What have you found has worked out well in process for you?
I think it's understanding the playbook that the client will deliver to us, but analyzing it every single time. And to me, that shows the client that we're looking for efficiencies where they can gain time, they can save money. So it's a partnership that, no, we don't want to just get the job done quicker, but we want to get it done better, and timely and cost effectively.
What is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you started out your career?
Oh boy, tough question. That relationships are critical in success.
Yes, I've learned that the hard way as well. I thought for many, many years that if I just did my job well, then that's all that really mattered, right? I was just going to be the best team player I possibly could. But I wasn't reaching out to the left, reaching out to the right, and developing those relationships. And then you wonder why you feel a bit isolated at times. It truly takes a team. Sure, and that's, I had that same sort of epiphany. It took quite a few years. Also, I've mentioned on the podcast, and I think I've mentioned it to you a few times, that coming from a military background, it was much easier to lead in the military than it was in the civilian world, because I could just basically order people to do things. And more importantly, people were there, they knew they didn't have a choice, and they begrudgingly just got it done. When you're leading individuals and you want that buy-in, we talked about the connection, we talked about kind of connect them to that why. Have you run into situations where it just wasn't a fit? And when did you know? Did you know it early on? Did you give them several opportunities to improve? How do you know when it's time to let a person go versus time to develop a person?
I think you've got to observe over time, one. Two, you've got to look at what inspires them, and who are they, and what are they affecting in the process. You could have someone, if they are heads down, paperwork processing, and don't affect a lot of other people, and they are task driven. All right, we'll give them a list of tasks to keep them busy forever. But if their interaction with people that they can affect with, whether it's their morale, whether it's their inspiration, kind of their focus and the vision, anything that kind of detracts from that, we've got to jump on early on, because that's a killer of team spirit.
Right. And at the cohort, as you remember, we went through what we call State of the Sea, and we talk about principles and patterns, that there are these fundamental things, human behavior, motivation, as you just mentioned, and certain cycles that we go through. And if we as leaders can see these patterns, we can work with them rather than against them. when you heard that at the cohort, did that make sense to you? Has that been your experience, or is it just more intuition rather than more of a science where you're looking for a pattern?
No, I think it made sense, and I think with the patterns in the state of the sea, to me is if you can knock down the peaks,
Yeah.
and have more of a calmer water, and you can handle the occasional big wave that comes through, and react to it, but not make that the norm, because knocking down those peaks, it gives predictability. It gives people a sense of stability, and it kind of gives them a calmness as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think people can endure the storm if they know that there's going to be an end to it.
Right.
And that comes through experience. And that comes through trust, as you mentioned, right? If they haven't been in difficult times before, but they trust you, you've connected with them, as you mentioned earlier, then they are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and to lead them forward. And as we've seen in many things, whether it's business or even the military, those trials that you go through, really, they build character, first of all. They also build camaraderie, that shared experience with one another. And I do think that all of us need to go through adversity at times. Otherwise, we don't know where our limits are. We don't know when we need other people. We don't know where our strengths and weaknesses are. And so, I think people want a calm sea, but if you don't have a little bit of turbulence out there, a little bit of chop, then you probably are not being a very good captain.
Yeah, and I don't think you need to shy away from them. You got to tackle them. They're not going to go away. They're going to be there. So you got to hit them face on and address them. And again, it's how you're going to react to them. The end result may not be what you desire early on. You may have to struggle through it in order to get the right result. But it won't go away if you just ignore it.
Roger that. Kind of a little bit of a trick question here. I think I know the answer, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you like fire preventing or firefighting?
Oh. I think firefighting.
Yes, I was going to agree with you, because you get energized. They talked about problem solving, right? If there's no problem for you to solve, then there's really, what do I do?
Right? I think, and we go to conferences and events that there are multiple fixture installation companies from around the country. Like, bring them on. Competition keeps you sharp. Firefighting keeps you sharp, keeps you on your toes, and keeps you thinking, keeps you engaged.
Yes, and I've always said in my conversations with Chandler is I have spent so much of my career firefighting, in the dysfunction of what happens within teams or projects, that it begins to wear you out. And you're like, does it have to be this hard? And so you tend to start pushing yourself towards fire prevention. But the thing about fire prevention, there was a great book called Upstream by Dan Heath, talks about that no one really knows that you do fire prevention, because if you do it well, the fire never comes up. And so it's not as visible as firefighting is, but it's very, very important.
Sure.
And as I moved myself upstream and started doing more and more fire prevention, I got satisfaction out of it, but largely people started to say, well, why do we have you, right? You got all this great experience, but you're not putting those good skills to use because you're not putting out some fire. So I think you need both, but I think where the energy is definitely in the firefighting. Not that I would go around lighting fires, but there's definitely something to be learned through that. The other thing I was going to ask you, Brian, is when you're new to the Rosewood family of companies, relatively new, and we often start putting blinders on when we're in an organization too much, right? You start to believe your own stories. You start to see things the similar way. And how have you fought that in companies you've been with for a long period of time? You were with one of your employers for 10 years. How do you keep that newness of thought rather than saying, well, this is the way we've always done it? How do you kind of get that combat, that sort of, I think it's called the confirmation bias, where you you look for the information that you want so you can verify what you already believe.
Yeah. In kind of processes and systems that are out there, and it's the way you've always done it. Well, when you interview someone, for example, and you're looking at the resume and they've got 25 years of experience of doing something, they might have 25 years worth of bad habits. So I want to dive into it. I want to study it. I want to understand why you've been doing it for 25 years. And understand understanding the why behind the processes. There might not be a right way or a wrong way, but there's always probably a different way in order to get the end result that you're looking for. And again, efficiencies, scalability, those are the things that I look for when I, look at, something that may be working and has been working forever, but it's a different time. We have different technology. We've got different skill set of, the workforce that's out there. So you're always looking for opportunities to kind of make it better.
Actually, you brought up two key points that we've talked about previously on the podcast. Number one, seasonality, right? Like you said, what you've done before may have worked out very, very well, but things are always constantly changing. The state of the sea is constantly changing. So you've got to make sure that you are aware of whether or not what you've done in the past still applies to today. And then, asking the right question at the right time, at the right depth, that asking why question. And I think you've been great at that since you've been part of Rosewood, is that you've challenged us, right? You've asked, why do we do things a certain way? And it challenged us because of several things. Number one, can we articulate why we do things that way? And number two, by asking the question, it causes us to think that, yeah, why do we do things that way? Why don't we look for an improvement and use innovate to elevate and try to iterate what we're doing? And you've been fantastic at that. And that's why I enjoy working with you so much, because you bring a different perspective. You're operationally minded like I am, but you have different experiences. And something that seems so blatantly obvious to me, you come in and I go, wow, I didn't even know that way existed. So that's been a great thing. When you've come and become part of Rosewood, have there been things that you've discovered about yourself that you didn't know until you became part of Rosewood?
Just really kind of absorbing all of the newness of everything.
Okay.
And getting a complete understanding, not just diving into my wheelhouse and what my true strength is, but really looking for the opportunities where it's not my strength, diving into that and saying, how do I get more exposed to it? How do I get more of an understanding of it through the Rosewood group and the whether it's the understanding of the legacy systems that are in place or the processes that have been in place and instilled through Rosewood, just opening up my mind and just getting an understanding of all that.
And you wear two hats. Like I said, you're the COO for Rosewood, but you're also the interim president for one of our operating companies. How do you balance those two, right?
Good questions.
Yeah.
Really the probably the primary focus right now is ProVantage.
Okay.
Because prior to me coming on board, Rosewood was rolling along and successful, and the need for the ProVantage support emerged, and then fortunately I have the capabilities to jump into that role until we change direction on that, and
right.
and moving forward with the process. It's looking at the big picture from Rosewood, but looking at the the minor detail from ProVantage. It takes a lot of juggling, knowing when to change hats.
Yes, and I think again the value that you bring to us, because you're serving as one of the OpCo presidents and you're on the Rosewood executive team, you can see how well or how poorly we translate strategy into execution. And more importantly, you also can see what it's like to be down at the trenches and being one of the OpCos and hey, letting the senior team know that, look, there's some struggles out there. whether that is in hiring, whether that is in the changing landscape of some of our markets that our operating companies are in. And it just offers a very unique perspective. You see it from the bottom and you see it from the top. And often when we move ourselves into more senior roles, we only start to see things from the top and we forget what it's like to be at the bottom. So I've really enjoyed you bringing that new perspective to us.
Yeah, I try to, kind of dissect it to looking at the different opcos that are out there and through the Rosewood vision, will it work for one, but will it work for all of them?
Yes.
Understanding the effect that one Rosewood program would have, through the different individual opcos, that it might work for ProVantage, but it might not work for Penmark, et cetera.
Right. I'm going to ask you kind of a crazy question. I just thought of it off the top of my head. What do you think of this AI stuff? We're operators, right? What do you think about that? How is it going to affect people who are in the business of getting stuff done?
Yeah, I think it's great for planning, for strategy, for scope of work, for definition of processes and support. Nothing's going to replace getting it done in the real world, though. That truck backs up to a loading dock, they knock on the door, and I've got a truckload, 2 truckloads worth of fixtures to unload and assemble and put together. AI will help in the plans and the layouts and the schematics, but rolling up the sleeves and getting it done, it's going to still take human interaction on that.
Yeah, the human interaction piece, I keep coming back to that. So even though AI can provide us a lot of speed and save us time and a lot of things, it still takes a human to put the prompt in. Yep. And it still takes a human to discern whether or not that information coming out of that tool is indeed accurate and relevant. And then more importantly, AI is not going to establish that relationship with that customer. Right? It's still going to come down to people. And so it doesn't sound as if you're afraid of AI. That's not your character in general. No. But there's been a lot of talk about it. I know here within the Rosewood family of companies, we're trying to figure out how do we best leverage it. And I definitely think that we're still going to need people. It's all going to come down to people, especially when you start pulling triggers, as we would say. So Brian, to kind of wrap it up, if as you look across your experience base, you look across what you've done here at Rosewood, what are you excited about? What's, obviously we talked about technology, but, what keeps you going? There's a lot of things you could do. You could be out on a boat somewhere right now, but what keeps you in the game?
I think kind of providing the experience and the leadership of building a team. And this is a new team here for me, building them and seeing the growth of newer team members and where they want to go, what they want to do. And my job is to get them there, carve out that path to get them there, and give them the support and the kind of the belief in them that they've got the skill set in order to achieve what they want to achieve, because everybody's a little bit different.
Roger that. And for those of you out there who don't know, Brian actually is not based here in North Carolina with us at the Rosewood Family Companies. He's out of Utah. So we appreciate you spending so much time with you here with us in North Carolina, Brian. And is there a difference between business in Utah and business in North Carolina? I'm curious.
No.
No? It's all the same? Doesn't matter where you are?
It's
just more picturesque out there, a little bit cooler.
There's still snow on the top of the mountains up there.
Yes.
No, I mean, it's, again, whether you have a retail store that's opening in Utah or a retail store that's opening, in Florida or North Carolina, or put it on the moon, you still have certain processes that you have to follow in order to make it happen.
Yeah, roger that. Well, Brian, appreciate you joining us here at the Powerhouse Perspective. Welcome to Rosewood, even though it's been 10 plus months.
Appreciate you having me.
Looking forward to what you continue to do for the ProVantage operating company, and I'm looking forward to getting you full time into the RET as our COO. So much more I can learn from you. So I appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us on the Powerhouse Perspective, and we'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.